Okay, yes, I know there is Album of the Year to talk about. Yes, I know there are so many performances to talk about. But y'all, I can't stop thinking about Joni Mitchell making her return to the Grammys. Today on the podcast, the Grammys were last night. It's time for the highlights. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. It is the morning after music's biggest night, which makes it music's biggest morning. No, I don't think it does. And I still can't believe this actually happened.
I looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still.
That is the legend, the greatest, the pride of the prairies, Joni Mitchell. She made a very rare public appearance at last night's Grammy Awards. It was her first ever performance at the Grammys at the age of 80. Honestly, that blows my mind so much. But what a better time for us, for Joni to show up than in a year when all the major Grammy categories were dominated by women. So who came out on top? We're going to talk about this, talk about the highlights of last night's Grammy telecast. We got two music journalists, both in LA, Reanna Cruz of Vulture and Maria Sherman of the Associated Press. Reanna, Maria, you guys are up early, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is going to be a good time. There's a lot to talk about, but because this is a Canadian show, we have to start with the moment that I just mentioned, which is Joni. Joni making this incredibly rare live appearance. She's backed by this all-star cast. You got Lucius on stage. You got Brandi Carlile on stage. Alison Russell. Montreal's own, I should mention, Alison Russell, who won a Grammy as well for Best American Roots Performance yesterday. Maria, you were in the press room at the Grammys last night. How did the vibe shift when Joni took the stage? What was it like watching her from that spot?
I will say it was one of the few moments where it was silent in the press room, and it's kind of hard to get journalists to be quiet, especially when we're all reporting in real time.
Yeah.
And I did see a couple press representatives kind of sneak out of the room and come back and say that they saw many people bawling in the actual showroom, which is to be expected, I guess.
Yeah. Reanna, what about you watching that moment? What was that like for you?
Man, it really hammered home the fact that Joni is such a treasure.
Yeah.
And I mean, whether it was, in the Grammys press room or like in my apartment, the friends that I had, hush fell over the room as soon as she started. And there were a lot of misty eyes, both here and in the arena. You saw it on Beyonce's face. Everybody was so transfixed. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, there was something like, I almost wanted like a split cam, of like Joni performing on the stage. And then this camera that just kept going from face to face to face. Dua Lipa looking like she's on the verge of tears. Taylor Swift looking like she's really transfixed by the performance. I was also crying in my house watching Joni. And I should mention that like I saw Joni Mitchell perform last summer at the Joni Jam, which was in Seattle, Washington. And and that was her first sort of ticketed performance in like 20 years or so. And just the difference between her performance in June and now was quite incredible to me. Like her voice even sounds clearer and stronger than it did 6-7 months ago. So it's just good to have Joni back and performing again. So listen, we knew that Joni's appearance was going to happen, but the one that we didn't know was going to happen is this.
I want to say thank you to the fans by telling you a secret that I've been keeping from you for the last 2 years, which is that my brand new album comes out April 19th. It's called The Tortured Poets Department. I'm going to go and post the cover right now backstage.
The Tortured Poets Department. That is Taylor Swift. She's accepting an award for Best Pop Vocal Album for Midnights, and then used that announcement as the occasion to announce this new album. Maria, I feel like the reaction in the press room would have been a little bit different to that. So what was that like?
You would think that, but when she announced a new album, everybody's furiously writing because then we have another story we have to report on. So it is another brief moment of quietude in the press room.
Yeah.
it's funny. Before that, I was joking with my editor because I saw that was, as soon as they announced the award, 2 pop awards quickly in succession. I thought there'd be maybe more of a diversity of genre in the award show, even though this is the Grammys and they have their traditional approaches to things.
Yeah.
But as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, they're going to give Taylor Swift something. And maybe that's why her website is currently down. And now I feel like I need to play the lottery because I'm never that. I don't possess those psychic abilities. But yeah, she certainly did that.
Maria, what that tells me is that like you're not on Taylor Swift Twitter, because like Taylor Swift Twitter had known the whole day. She changed her picture to a black and white photo. Suddenly we're like, oh, something is happening. We don't know what that is going to be. So listen, you got to get on the Taylor Swift Twitter, or maybe don't. Like maybe live your life in peace. Maybe Reanna.
I thought it was Reputation. I thought it was
that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Reanna, what was your reaction to Taylor announcing this new album?
Well, I also thought it was going to be Reputation, but it's interesting. I feel like a lot of acts last night chose to use the Grammy stage as an opportunity to promote new music, whether it be like Billy Joel or U2 or Taylor Swift, and like announcing a whole new record. And I don't know if I agree with that choice because, putting the others aside and focusing on Taylor, she's the biggest pop star in the world.
Yes.
And using, I think, the night where other people get their flowers to announce a new record and kind of be like, the Taylor Swift machine will continue through 2024. It monopolized the dialogue in a way that, I don't think she intended, but that is what we're talking about, on a night where people like Victoria Monet won.
That's 100%. I mean, like there's a disconnect, I think, between the artist that Taylor Swift sometimes sees herself to be, like, oh, I'm just a person announcing a new album, and the amount of oxygen that people are willing to give it. And I say this as someone who's currently talking about it on the show. But sometimes there is maybe an outsized reaction to Taylor doing literally anything, sometimes just breathing, that it seems like the announcement of a new album shouldn't overshadow everything else that happened that night. But it does end up doing that. That is what all the headlines end up becoming about the next day. For example, this is like this historic Grammy night, but also like pretty sure it's the first Grammy where one winning artist got carried out of the venue in handcuffs. We're not talking about that, and that seems crazy to me. Maria, can you tell us what happened with Killer Mike?
Sure, yeah. So Killer Mike came backstage into the press room.
He won 3 Grammys yesterday, right?
After winning 3 Grammys, at the premiere ceremony. So for people who don't know, there is a ceremony prior to the Grammys that isn't televised where they give out about 80 awards, and that's where you see a lot of the rap awards, international awards, things of that nature. And he came back and he gave this really impassioned speech about, not quitting and working really hard at any age, especially not aging out of hip hop. And then he leaves, and about an hour later, we start to hear rumblings that Killer Mike has been taken out in handcuffs. And so my colleague began sort of reporting on it and quickly learned that there had been some sort of altercation at about 4 p.m. our time, so about an hour before the Grammys started, and he was taken out for some kind of misdemeanor, and he has a court date later in the month. And that's still basically all we know. At first, it broke out kind of like a rumor, and then proved itself to be true.
The frustrating thing about the Killer Mike earlier on in the day is that like he wins Best Rap Album for his new album, Michael. And you would think that Best Rap Album would be one of the categories that you would reserve for actually broadcasting on air. And it somehow does not make the telecast. It does not make the televised ceremony. This ceremony is 3.5 hours long. We have time to dip in and be like, hey, how are you two doing? Are they still trapped in the Sphere in Las Vegas? And they are, but we don't have time somehow for broadcasting Killer Mike. Reanna, does that tell you anything about the Grammys' priority?
Yeah, I mean, I felt that way watching the ceremony before the televised broadcast where they're giving out all of, their 90-something awards. And I felt a disconnect because all of the rap awards were in the pre-broadcast.
Yes.
Most of the R&B awards were in the pre-broadcast, the global awards as well. And I think there is a disconnect because you have the Grammys being like, oh, we made a new category for African music performance. And, we want to make a really big deal about it, rightfully so. We're going to put Burna Boy on the main broadcast. But when Tyla wins, that's not going to air.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is something that I there's a push and pull with the things Grammys says and the things the Recording Academy does.
We've been, I think, like as long as our Grammys have existed, we keep talking about whether they've been making the right or wrong choices. Because like a lot of other awards institutions, like this is an institution that received a lot of criticism in recent years. For example, for being male dominated. And this led them to overhauling the voter base that they have because they have 2,400 people who vote on some of these categories. Last night, we saw women win all the major big categories. So Taylor Swift wins Album of the Year for Midnights. She became the first artist to win it 4 times. Before that, she was tied for 3 times with a bunch of other people. Billie Eilish won Song of the Year for What Was I Made For from the Barbie movie. Miley Cyrus gets Record of the Year for Flowers. Victoria Monet wins for Best New Artist. Rihanna, when you see results like this, do you sense that like the criticisms are working and that the system is actually adjusting to the way that we criticize it? Is that too optimistic?
Yes. Yeah, I maybe a little optimistic.
Okay, yeah.
I will say yes and no, because what I will say is that this broadcast this year was very watchable and very fun. And I definitely think that was a reason that contributed to it. You know, it's hard not to be like, oh, this is a fun thing happening when you're watching like Miley Cyrus, you know? But what I will say is that I don't know, there's the intersectionality issue of it all, you know, and I think like Jay-Z talks about it in his speech, right? It's like, you know, there's an issue, I think, with giving Black and Latino women their flowers. And I feel like it's still apparent. So I will say yes and no. I wish there was more. You know, I wish there was that extra step taken by the Recording Academy.
So Maria, like my question for you is, did the right women win in the big 4 categories last night?
I feel like I'm going to give you a yes and no answer as well.
That's okay.
You know, we've seen the Recording Academy at least vocalize concerted efforts to change their voting demographics, bringing in a lot more people under 40, a lot more women, a lot more non-white voters. And I think maybe that's why we see a lot of women. But then it becomes a question of what kind of women get to be afforded these opportunities. And it's typically white women, getting at Rihanna's comment about intersectionality. Yeah. You know, I would have loved to have seen one of the 2 incredibly talented Black women win Album of the Year yesterday, which would have been the first time in 25 years since the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which would have been a groundbreaking moment. And, you know, with Jay-Z's speech, which I hope we get to talk about a little bit later, it was sort of at front of mind for me, at least as a viewer, to kind of consider that what we were talking about, where we're placing people of color, hip rap artists, and especially women of color.
You know what? You both have brought up the Jay-Z speech. Why don't we listen to a bit of it right now?
Some of you gonna go home tonight and feel like you've been robbed. Some of you may get robbed. Some of you don't belong in the category. All right, no, that was it. No, when I get nervous, I tell the truth.
Some of y'all don't belong in the category. Jay-Z was not playing. Jay-Z was not playing at all. Rihanna, what was your reaction to that speech?
You know, I think the speech was maybe one of the realest moments of the night. You know, I appreciated Jay-Z for saying the thing out loud that a lot of viewers might have had on their minds in one way or another. I know, like me especially. Yeah. I thought it was a really great moment.
Yeah, Murray, what about you? What was your reaction to it as you were watching it?
Absolutely. I mean, he's always spoken truth to power, right? That's part of his sort of charm and his skill. But it was really refreshing to see. And he gave historical examples of rap artists, you know, like breaking the fold, changing how the Recording Academy kind of recognizes hip hop artists, but then still putting it in the pre-televised event. And then later in the speech, gesturing to Beyonce as, you know, the artist who has won more Grammys than anybody else, but never Album of the Year. Clearly there is something happening that the math isn't mathing or whatever. Something's not right.
Well, I mean, that was his speech, right? His speech said, like, this doesn't add up. It doesn't add up that you recognize this person with more Grammys than anyone else, but she's never won Album of the Year. And this has been the frustration when it comes to the Beyonce recognition, because Beyonce gets more recognition in that room than almost anybody. Everyone gives a standing ovation the minute she walks in the room. You know, all the past performances or just nominations anyway. There is this like aura of, oh my God, it's Beyonce. But yet she's never won Album of the Year. And I appreciated Jay-Z saying, you know what, I really appreciate winning this Global Impact Award. That's very nice. But what are we doing here? Like, what is this project of the Grammys all about to begin with? And I agree with you. It really was one of the realest moments. We also asked you guys about some of your most memorable moments. Maria, this was the answer that you gave.
Nothing compares to you. Artists for ceasefire, peace in the world.
It is quite remarkable to me that we've gone through the entire award season and Annie Lennox, during the tribute to Sinead O'Connor, becomes the first person to mention ceasefire. She's referring, of course, to the Israel-Hamas war. Reanna, was that a surprise to you that Annie Lennox would do that on that stage?
You know, I think like the overwhelming silence during this award season has been something that I've become used to. So to hear Annie Lennox call for a ceasefire on stage, it was surprising in that regard, but not surprising when you consider the politics of Sinead O'Connor, you know, because like I'm a Sinead, you know, head. I love her. And that is something that she would do. She always called attention to the issues in the world that needed more attention, that needed justice. And I think Annie doing that on the Grammy stage was really important and perhaps more Sinead than anything else that she did that night.
Yeah, it would seem improbable that Sinead would let you have this entire evening of pageantry and beautiful dresses and long speeches without also mentioning something like that. That is something that strikes me as very much in the spirit of Sinead O'Connor. Maria, I have to imagine there was some kind of reaction to that in the press room. What was it like?
Mostly just people kind of nodding silently. It's sort of, I agreed with Reanna. I think it's absolutely the ultimate way that Annie Lennox could have paid respect to Sinead. It's felt appropriate and kind of refreshing. I've been closely watching some of the other award shows, and there hasn't been any mention. There hasn't even been very many symbolic gestures, like of sort of some sign of solidarity on the red carpet, like sort of hoping to see. So maybe this will kickstart something. I don't know, but
yeah.
Definitely welcomed addition to the show, I think.
In that regard, I should shout out Boy Genius, who also had, I think they were wearing ceasefire pins on their suits, and they didn't get a chance to speak in the telecast, so who knows how that would have turned out. But they were the other artists that I saw noting that. I just want to play you guys my favorite moment of the award show last night, real quick. Come on. Tracy Chapman on the Grammy stage performing with Luke Combs, because Luke Combs' version of Fast Car was nominated for Record of the Year. Listen, great deal. I love Tracy Chapman so much, but also, I don't know about you guys, but watching that at home, just the minute she appeared on the screen and she sang first, I just started tearing up, and I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I get to witness Tracy Chapman again. I'm so delighted that this is happening. Was it a big moment for you as well, Maria?
Absolutely. And I thought that was the way to do it. If you're going to bring, you know, the second most massive country song of the last year, if you're listening to terrestrial country radio, you hear a Luke Combs cover of that song once every 30 minutes. It's kind of inescapable. But to perform it with Tracy was absolutely the right call. To show Tracy first was absolutely the right call. Yeah. And it's just sort of a reminder of the power of that song, the success it's had, you know. she won a Grammy for in 1989, and here we are again.
Yeah.
This cover version getting nominated for Record of the Year. So I thought it was a great moment, and it certainly set the stage. I think in the press room we were all like, I think this might be a good show this year.
Yeah, like I have to say, Reanna, just watching that moment happen and watching it unfold. First of all, immediately I was like, "Oh, Fast Car is like one of the greatest songs of all time," and I don't mean like top 20. I mean like top 5. Like it's just one of those songs that is truly in every way kind of timeless. But also the reaction online tells me that there's such a hunger for an artist like Tracy Chapman. There's like we're all missing an artist of the caliber of Tracy Chapman so much. What was your reaction watching that?
I had the same exact reaction. I was like, wow, Fast Car really is a good song.
Yeah.
To the point where watching that performance made me like the Luke Combs version.
You did not like it before?
It's not that I hated it. I just didn't really see the point. And then I was watching it and I was like, oh, wow, like this is so good that the cover version is good by proxy. Like it's just such a good song. And as soon as she came on stage and started singing, and her voice is so measured and still sounds exactly like it does on the recording, like it really blew me away. It took my breath away. And that was the moment where I also at home was like, Grammys might be good this year.
I mean, that's actually kind of an amazing thing when you think about it, because the award shows in general, we keep talking about the slump that they're in. The Emmys last month, they hit an all-time ratings low with 4.3 million viewers. That's pretty rough when you think about it. The ratings of the Grammys have also like been steadily rising for the past 3 years. There's something that the Grammys are getting right. What is that thing, Maria, do you think?
I think in the last couple of years, there has been more of an effort to actually reflect what's happening in sort of mainstream pop music world. And I think that was reflected in this show. So that's going to be of more interest. I think the fact that the Grammys kind of double as a concert is always going to draw more viewers. There's opportunity to maybe see live performers that you wouldn't have considered before, or next to other musicians maybe you wouldn't consider before. I think the layout of the Grammys makes it more visually compelling now that everybody's kind of seated at a table and like chummy with one another, as opposed to a sort of cold, massive arena.
Yes.
I think they're sort of with just like rows and rows of seats. I think there have been a couple of changes that have really made it more interesting to viewers. And with, oh my gosh, Celine Dion,
iconic moment, delivering the Album of the Year award. Yes. Absolutely.
Now we're seeing that there are like some really interesting surprises that are in like that would make you want to tune in, I suppose.
Yeah, I had the uneasy realization as I was turning off my television last night, Reanna, that I think the Grammys are like 3 for 3 over the last 3 years or so. And so there's something kind of compelling to me about the fact that they keep pulling this out. They keep sort of putting on a good show, regardless of all the chatter that we have about whether award shows are relevant or not. I had a great time watching that show. I had a great time talking about it with you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Rihanna, Maria, thank you so much for your time.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course. That was Commotion's Grammys wrap-up panel. Reanna Cruz is a writer for Vulture and producer of the Switched on Pop podcast. And Maria Sherman is a music journalist for the Associated Press. They were in Los Angeles.
Somebody call me refugee. Somebody call me refugee.
That is Refugee by Kanon. It was a huge night for the Somali-Canadian artist. He took home the Grammy for this track in the Song for Social Change category. Kanon was not the only Canadian to take home an award. We talked about Joni Mitchell earlier. Joni won for Best Folk Album. That was incredible. Montreal's Alison Russell, she won her first Grammy for Best American Roots Performance. Another Montrealer, Yannick Nézi-Séguin, won a Grammy for Best Opera Recording. And the producer, Serban Ghenea, won for his work on Taylor Swift's album, Midnights. Congratulations to all of them. And listen, that is it for the podcast today. Remember, you can listen to any episode of Commotion anytime you like, wherever you get your podcast. And also check us out on Instagram. We are at Commotion CBC. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. We are going to be back tomorrow. We're going to talk about TikTok, because there's a really fascinating conversation happening about this genre of fiction called fantasy. Okay, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. I'll see you then.